Hey everyone, I am so excited to get back into podcasting. It's been a couple of months, but we're getting right back into it with some awesome stories and episodes and all different kinds of topics that we're going to be covering. I did want to let you guys know that today's story does include infant loss, but Cassie's story is just amazing, and I really think it can help a lot of people who might be dealing with something similar or have dealt with something similar. This will be a 2-part episode, one with Cassie's birth stories, and the second part with lots of resources on how to deal with infant loss and resources to use while you're in the hospital, while you're pregnant, and postpartum. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Incredible Moms. This is Crystal Evaristo with the Incredible Moms podcast, where we discuss getting pregnant, being pregnant, having babies, being a mom, and so much more. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey, everyone. I'm here with Cassie today. She's going to share her birth stories.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie. Let me give you a little bit of background about myself. I am mama to 3 kiddos. One of them, the oldest, is named Aiden. He is 2.5 and full of a crazy amount of energy right now, as I'm sure any of you who have toddlers know. The second oldest is Dion. He is 11 months old as of, I think, today. And then we also have Emilia, who was stillborn at 35 weeks. So I'm going to share their story with you today. So I figured I would start just with a quick summary of Aiden's. It wasn't super exciting, but I'll give some background for my experience with pregnancy. So my wife and I decided that we wanted to have kids right after I finished grad school. So we were young. We were, want to say 24, 25. And because of the fact that we were a 2-female relationship, we ended up going to a fertility clinic to get pregnant. We first started doing co-IVF, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's when they remove the egg from one partner, fertilize it in the lab, and then place the embryo in the other partner. So there's a whole lot of science and shots and tracking and blood work and all that fun stuff to get through that. So we did 2 cycles of co-IVF. Both of them went horribly wrong. We had no embryos survive, nothing stuck. They couldn't really tell us why anything was going wrong, but it just did not work. So we kind of gave up on trying to have kids for a little bit. We were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and we were about to move down to North Carolina, where we're both from. So we put that on hold for a little bit. Once we got established in North Carolina, we found another fertility clinic. This time we decided to try IUI, so intrauterine insemination. So it's still a scientific process, but less scientific than IVF. So we did 4 cycles of IUI. And on the last one, they were trying to figure out why it wasn't working. So I was the one who was attempting to carry for both trials, so for the IVF and for the IUI. So they decided to do a saline ultrasound on me at the 4th cycle and saw that there was like an almost blockage or something like that on my fallopian tube. And we were thinking maybe that's why it wasn't working. And the day of the insemination, I told the doctor I wanted to cancel it because I was like, this isn't going to work. Like, clearly we just need to quit for a while. And she was like, no, it's fine. Like, we've come this far. We've taken all the meds. Like, let's just try it. That one, of course, was the one that ended up working. So we got pregnant with our oldest, Aiden. Pregnancy was pretty uneventful. I did have some periods of having really intense Braxton Hicks contractions, but I was a first-time mom, so didn't fully understand that they were Braxton Hicks contractions. But strangely, they were like 1 minute apart for like hours on end. I ended up in the hospital a couple times, and they ended up giving me, I do not know the name. They called it an adrenaline shot.
Like a betamethasone shot?
Maybe, yeah. To get the contractions to stop. Besides that, nothing crazy happened. I went into labor naturally at 38 weeks, 5 days. Had an awesome childbirth experience, awesome nurse, which makes a huge difference in labor and delivery. So I walked the halls. I ended up getting an epidural when it was starting hurting too bad. I took a nap. I woke up. I pushed for like 7 minutes, and there he was.
Wow.
So that went really, really well. I did go through a period after he was born of postpartum depression, nothing that required me to be hospitalized, but I did go see a counselor at about 2 weeks postpartum. There was just so many changes that happen when you're a first-time mom. And I don't think it's fully possible to be prepared for it, but I was not at all prepared for it.
Right.
So went through that. I did have some thoughts of not hurting myself, but hurting Aiden. But I was aware that they were bad and I didn't want to do them. So I would like make sure that I hid all the knives in the house or the scissors. Like they all had to be put away because I was afraid that I would like grab them and stab him all of a sudden just on impulse.
I've heard that before. That's kind of a common thing, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, I went to counseling. I kind of just got to a point about 2 months postpartum where I just did not feel like myself. And I was like, okay, I got to prioritize myself. And so I just started being what I call selfish. So I asked for help, basically. Stopped trying to do everything on my own. Asked my wife to pick up some of the things that I had been insisting on me doing them instead of her. So just made some self-care time, which kind of knocked me out of the
And sleep, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, sleep. Sleep also was very important. We also were having a lot of trouble with feeding, which I feel like was a big contributing factor. I worked at a very small rural hospital at the time. I'm an occupational therapist, so I've spent a lot of time in the hospital setting. And I had taken a lactation class with this woman who, bless her heart, I know she was trying to help, but she went down the whole route of you don't breastfeed, you're going to cause your child to have diabetes and autism and the intense rest is best, like to a fault. And as a first-time mom, I let it kind of get into my head because she was the only expert I had talked to about it. And so that was a big part of it too. And I eventually had a lactation consultant at my pediatrician who was amazing. And she basically said, maybe you should try to back off a little bit. And
was that around here?
That was at Jefferson and Artman.
Oh, okay. I've heard really good things about that.
Yeah, it was amazing. She saved my life. But anyway, so she basically was like, you can do formula if you want to do formula. Like, baby's going to be okay. And so it took me till 6 months, but we finally switched him over to formula. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. Well, not my entire life, but it was a good decision.
In your first-time mom life.
In my first-time mom life, it was the best decision I could have made for myself. And I wish I had done it sooner. So about that time period, we decided we wanted to start trying to have another kid. We wanted them to be close together in age. My wife grew up with a sister who was about 2 years apart from her, and she liked having a sibling that was close in age. I was an only child, so I didn't really have an opinion on the subject. But we decided to try for another kid. We decided to try co-IVF again. We really liked the idea of carrying the other person's child, which is only really possible in our situation with co-IVF.
I was going to ask you about that. So co-IVF, you are just, sometimes people mix like their eggs and kind of whoever wins. Mm-hmm. So you just use her eggs and a sperm donor.
Yes.
And then IUI, you're just basically inseminating.
You just inseminate the sperm into the uterus. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Aiden is biologically mine. So my oldest is biologically my child. And the twins, who I'll talk about in a little bit, are biologically my wife's children.
Okay.
Yeah. So for co-IVF, you just have one partner. They go through a stimulation phase. So they take a whole bunch of, I can't even remember all the names of the drugs, lots of drugs, to basically make the uterus or the ovaries produce a heck of a lot of eggs.
Yeah.
And then they actually go through surgery to remove the eggs, inseminate them in a lab, wait for them to grow either for 3 or 5 days, depending on the cycle process that you're going through. And then I, as the carrier, would go in and they would stick a little tube up your cervix and push like the embryos and the fluid into your uterus basically and say good luck.
Right. And so like I went through IVF to be a surrogate, so
okay,
I'm familiar, but it's nice for them to, our listeners to know.
Yes. So we did IVF, got a whole lot of really good grade embryos. We had switched to a different sperm donor at this point. It was actually after the first 2 IUIs that we tried back when we were trying to get pregnant with my oldest didn't work, we switched sperm donors. So our kids are all still the same sperm donor, but it's a different one than we initially started with. So we did a round of co-IVF, had a lot of really good grade embryos, and we're kind of crediting the second sperm donor for that because it did not work the first time, worked really well the second time. We decided to try to implant 2 embryos because in the past when we had tried co-IVF, it did not work at all. But we tried to do 2 embryos and neither of them stuck. And so we were like, well, we're just going to do as many as you let us try to do because maybe that will increase our chances of getting pregnant. So they put in 2 really good grade embryos. I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the grades, it was like grade AA or something like that. They grade them. And it was like some of the, like almost the best you could get. And our doctor came in and was like, you sure you want to do 2? And we were like, yes, we want to do 2. And she was like, okay, well, I'm looking at the grades and there's a pretty high chance of you guys getting pregnant with twins if you do 2. And we were like, bring it. Like, that's really fine.
Don't split too.
Yeah. Like we're just trying to get pregnant. We're trying to have kids. Like we weren't in the mindset of, oh no, but twins are higher risk of this or anything like that. We just were excited to potentially be pregnant. So we went through that cycle, did the blood test that you do.
HCG.
Yeah, but they tested my HCG and it was through the roof. And the doctor was like, okay, I know I said that there might be a chance of twins, but I'm thinking there might be more than one baby in there. And we were like, great, awesome. Like, so they did another test and it like tripled. And we basically had come to the understanding through conversations with the doctor before we even had the ultrasound that it was probably at least twins, just because my numbers were so high. The great thing about being in a fertility clinic is you have so much information. So I actually went back to my like previous pregnancy with my oldest and was looking at the HCG numbers for this many days post-ovulation versus this one. And like, it's a lot higher. So anyway, we kind of had some time to come to the realization that it was probably more than one baby before we actually even had the 6-week ultrasound. So we knew that it was more than one pretty early on. So we went to the 6-week ultrasound. They found 2 heartbeats. We were excited but nervous, which I feel like is probably a good summary of how everyone feels when they find out they're having twins.
Right.
It's just a lot to handle, but definitely very exciting. We had never really wanted to have twins. It's not something that I feel like some people kind of
hope for it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, they're so cute together. We can dress them into matching outfits or like all that kind of stuff, which was never really where our headspace was at. But once we found out we were having twins, we were over the moon. We didn't really purchase anything for them because we had just recently had a baby. So we kind of just planned on buying everything or it's using what we had used for my oldest first. We bought a couple of things that were twin specific, but we didn't go out on a shopping spree, which is, I feel like what I probably would have done if it had been my first children.
Right.
But I feel like probably what everyone does their first child, you go on a shopping spree because there's so much stuff you have to buy anyway. So around that time of us getting pregnant with twins, that was the fall of 2019. So I was coming up, my due date was in June of 2020. So I was pretty pregnant when the pandemic hit. I was about 30 weeks pregnant or so with twins. And And that definitely added to the stress level of being pregnant with twins. I feel like me and every other pregnant person at the beginning of the pandemic was just a flurry of unknown. Right. We had no idea. There was no studies on pregnant people or what it could do to the babies, or what if you give birth and you have COVID, or can the babies get COVID, or what if they have to go to the NICU, and all of this uncertainty and fear that was just surrounding the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So that was the big kind of storyline of my pregnancy for me, just trying to figure out how to not get COVID and get separated from the babies when they were born. I also worked in a big hospital system, so I wasn't in a unit that was actively seeing COVID patients, but we were seeing patients who were recovering from COVID. So they weren't, they weren't positive anymore. But, at the beginning, how do you really know? How long do the particles stay contagious or anything like that? So that was the main stressor, I feel like, of my twin pregnancy, in addition to the fact that I was just tired.
So no extreme sickness or anything?
Nothing. I mean, I was sicker than I was with my first. I was very tired, and moving around got really hard at the end. But I mean, all in all, the doctors told me later it was one of the healthiest twin pregnancies that they had at their practice. Like, nothing was wrong. Babies looked great. There was a very slight concern with my blood pressure closer to the end. Around 33 weeks, I got diagnosed with gestational hypertension. But it was the bare minimum of the requirements to meet the gestational hypertension diagnosis. Mm-hmm. But because I had the diagnosis, they put me in for extra monitoring. So I was going to my regular OB, which was a high-risk OB, but I was also going to maternal fetal medicine to get growth scans. And then once I got diagnosed with gestational hypertension, I also started going in for biweekly stress tests. So babies were getting a lot of monitoring. I would go from one doctor to the next doctor, get scans and heartbeat checks and stress tests and all of the stuff that makes you feel like, okay, we're being taken care of. Like, we've got this. We've just kind of a waiting game at this point. I was 34 weeks. I went in for a stress test on a Thursday. So with twins, I'm going to say it just in case people don't know. There's baby A and baby B. So baby A is the one that's positioned closer to the cervix, typically. I think, yeah. And then baby B is the one that they're guessing will probably come out second. So baby A is my son, Dion. Baby B is my daughter, Emilia. So they did a stress test. Emilia, so baby B, showed off like always. She always was very reactive to the stress tests. So loved to kick and have her little heart rate like jump up and down and all the stuff that they're looking for when they do stress tests. And Dion, so baby A, was pretty, I guess he was just sleepy because he ended up being fine, but they had to do some like prodding, and they had a giant like vibrating wand that they like stuck on my they stuck on my stomach to try to get him, I guess, to wake up. And he eventually woke up, and they got what they were looking for with the reactivity of his heart rate going up and him kicking and wiggling. So that was the only concern that they had.
There was just one stress test that he would do that, or multiple?
It was just that one last stress test that they had to take extra measures. I'd had a couple of stress tests before where they both just kind of did what they needed to do without any prodding or intervention. Mm-hmm. But typically Emilia would show off first, and then Dion would go second. But that's kind of how the whole pregnancy was. Emilia would always be the one wiggling first, or be the one to respond to voices first. She was just a very opinionated baby from the very beginning.
Tell her personality.
Yes. And that is something that I really do feel like I know about her, is her personality, just through her movements and her responses to me. She was the first one I felt kick. She was always the one who I could get to wake up first if I was trying to do kick counts. She would always wake up first, and then her kicking would wake up Dion. So Dion was always a very sleepy baby on the inside, which actually rang true for on the outside too when he was born. We did the stress test. The only concern was Dion was a little bit off, but he ended up meeting the criteria and they were like, okay, like you're fine. You're coming back. I think it was like next Wednesday for another stress test. And I went home. Everything was great. The only weird thing that happened was on Tuesday morning, I woke up and I felt really nauseous, which wasn't abnormal for the pregnancy overall, but it had been several months since I had felt nauseous. And it was like a sudden wave of nausea. Like I woke up and felt first trimester nauseous. And it wasn't to the point where it was debilitating. It just was really uncomfortable. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to go to work. I'm going to just try. If I can't do it, I'll call out, but I'm going to give it a shot. So about 2 hours later, I was feeling fine. So I don't know. That's the only weird thing that happened. I remember going to work that day so specifically because number one, I felt nauseous. And number two, it was the beginning of the pandemic. So they were giving out free hand sanitizer. So I had a note written on my calendar to bring hand sanitizer bottle because they had like free, just
refills?
Basically, yes.
Oh.
They were like, they will refill it for free. But it was basically just pure rubbing alcohol. Essentially, it was
liquid.
It was just liquid. But you know what? It was the beginning of COVID and I was excited. So that was the only weird thing that happened that week. And then the next day, so Wednesday, I had a 2:30 appointment with the OB. So just my regular OB. I got off early. I wandered over to the OB. You know, I'm 35 weeks pregnant at this point. So I'm just kind of shuffling my way in. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Like, the babies are in the safe zone. Like, can we just get the babies out? Like, I'm ready for them to just be here. Because at least for me, for the second pregnancy, and I feel like for most multiples pregnancy, you feel 40 weeks pregnant at like 30 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're at that point, you're kind of just like, okay, like let's
two babies in there.
Yes. Yeah. Like they're big enough to survive on the outside. Like, let's just get them out. So I went to my regular OB appointment. They came in. I asked all my questions. What if they need to go to the NICU? What if I need to have a C-section? Do you guys have the clear drape or just the blue drape for the C-section? Or all those like minute details that I was worried about, as like any pregnant person is when they're getting closer to the due date. So they always at my regular OB did an ultrasound. It wasn't like a formal growth ultrasound, but they, since I was pregnant with twins, would always do like a basic ultrasound to check the heartbeats to make sure they were hearing two individually instead of just using the Doppler like they had used with my first pregnancy. So they brought in the ultrasound machine. We were chatting. They did a scan over baby A. So that's Dion. So my surviving twin. Looked great. Heart rate was like 143. He was head down. So we were looking at a vaginal delivery. And then I have this on video because I would videotape the ultrasounds because my wife couldn't come to the appointments because we were in COVID at that time. And I went back and I watched it later and she was just chatting away, but she was scanning baby B for forever. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to think when she was talking, because normally as soon as she starts scanning, she's like, oh, there's the heartbeat, you know, there it is. This is what it is. And she was taking forever. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, like, is something wrong? Like, what's going on? Why are we taking forever to tell me that everything's okay? And she was just staring at the screen. She said, I'm a little bit concerned. And I was like, okay, like, what are we a little bit concerned about? Like, I know she switched to breech. Like, what could be going on? And she said, I don't think you have a heartbeat for baby B. And
this is the doctor or the
this is the PA. Okay. So there was a PA who was doing the scan. And she said, because of course, I think she couldn't formally tell me anything, which is why she said think. Or like uncertain terms. So she said, but I'm going to go get the doctors and they're just going to look and make sure I'm right. And I, at this point, am in denial. I'm like, well, she's a little diva. Like she's been giving people trouble this whole time. Like she wouldn't show her gender at the 20-week ultrasound. She gave them a hell of a time trying to find like the 4 chambers of her heart at the at like one of the formal, like, what was it? At one of the formal like growth scans. So she's just been kind of difficult this whole time. This is just her. She's a little diva. Like, I'm sure she's just, I don't know, doing something else to cause some drama in the office.
Yeah.
So she goes and gets the doctor. And honestly, I don't even really remember what the doctor said, because I feel like I know she confirmed that Emilia didn't have a heartbeat, but I don't remember a single thing she said, except that they were going to send me to maternal fetal medicine to confirm again. So at this
same
point,
building?
It's right across the street.
Oh, okay.
So at this point, I texted my wife initially as soon as they said that there might not be a heartbeat. And I didn't tell her what it was, but I was like, just get ready to come here. Like, just pack your stuff and start heading in this direction. Because in my mind, if something was wrong, we were delivering.
Right.
Like, something's wrong with the babies, we're getting them out. I'm expecting an emergency C-section at this point. Like, even if she is okay, like, something's got to be wrong for them to be telling me this. Right. So the doctor said something to confirm that she also thought Emilia had died. And then they left the room. And at this point, I have so much adrenaline going in my body that I'm not crying. But I think, I mean, honestly, looking back, I was in shock. Like, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of wondering why I wasn't being taken into emergency surgery. But they seemed to be kind of laid back about the process of, not laid back, like not caring, but like, okay, we're going to just get over to maternal fetal medicine when you can. And I was like, okay, let's go. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. Why are we even talking right now? Like, get a knife. Like, let's get them out. Like,
right.
And so my wife drove up, and I walked across the campus for where I work is very large. And I had parked on the opposite side because I also work at the place where I was getting maternal fetal medicine and OB care. So I, 35 weeks pregnant with twins, had to walk from one side of a very large campus to the other one. So it took me about 25 minutes of a walk to get back to where my car was. And Kathy's my wife. Kathy came and she met me in the parking lot because she said she was going to drive because she didn't want me driving at that point. And we just stayed on the phone in silence the whole time. Because
she knew at this point, obviously.
Yeah, I called her and I said, they think we lost Emilia. And she said, I'm coming. But I tried to start talking to her about it, being like, this is what they said, et cetera. But I think she was just so overwhelmed with information that she was like, let's just get confirmation from the maternal fetal medicine doctor before we like have a formal conversation. And I didn't really know what else to talk about. So we just stayed on the phone in silence while I walked past all the people in the hospital to get to the other side of the other side of the hospital where my car was. I actually walked right past my supervisor's office. And I, in that moment, was like, should I go tell her? I should probably go tell her I'm not going to be at work tomorrow. Or I'm going to tell her I should be late. And I had at least enough wherewithal to be like, Cassie, this is not the time for you to be putting in any formal notices to your supervisor. Like, just get to the car. So anyway, I got to the car. Kathy got there. We silently drove over to maternal fetal medicine, went and sat in the office, held hands, and just sat in silence. Because we knew it wasn't going to be a good visit. We got taken back, given the most silent ultrasound I think I've ever received in my entire life. Yeah. Because the techs can't tell you anything. But they also know, and we know. So they did baby A first, I think, just to torture me because we already knew that he was fine. But I think they also probably didn't want to. I'm sure it's not fun to do an ultrasound of a baby that's died. Yeah. They did ultrasound of baby A. Baby A looks great. They moved over to baby B, and they if you've ever had a growth ultrasound, or I guess the 20-week ultrasound, they put the little cursor over the heart and then they press a button and then it goes ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. So they pushed the button and it was just the loudest static I think I've ever heard in my entire life. And I know I've heard people say your heart drops. I felt it. Like it felt like my heart hit the floor. It was the strongest feeling like that I've ever felt. And I just couldn't process it. Because I think I really had been in denial up until that point. They were going to find something was wrong. We were going to the specialists. They were going to tell us, no, but it's faint, but we need to do something about it. And it was just the finality of that moment that I just broke. But I broke more internally. I didn't really cry at all. I remember being annoyed because there was somebody in the next room who, based on the amount that they were crying, had found out the same thing that we were in the middle of finding out. But they were doing our silent ultrasound scan, and all I heard was this person wailing in the background. And
distracting you, probably.
Yes. And at the moment, I was like, will you just shut up? Like, I'm trying to have my moment of my child has died. And obviously, looking back, I'm sure they were going through their own thing to be crying the way they were crying. But in the moment, I was just egotistically like, please just shut up. Like,
right.
I need this moment to be with me and me alone. So they confirmed Emilia had died. I really didn't know that much about stillbirth. I guess I knew that babies died at all gestational ages. But I also kind of thought it was because something was wrong. Like if the baby has a heart condition or some form of abnormality and everything had been fine. Everything had been perfect. And so it was not at all something I was expecting, which is, I think, another thing that just threw me for a loop because I was not prepared. I am a very statistical person and I do numbers and percentages. And I always, through both of my pregnancies, was like, okay, there's a 90% chance if the babies are born at this age that they will survive. Like there's a this percent chance of miscarriage until this week, and then it drops to this. And we were in the zone of there's not really that many statistics of anything going wrong. I think we were at like 0.01 or something right. Really, really low. There's a very low chance of something happening that late on without knowing something was wrong to begin with.
Especially at 35 weeks, you're like, oh my God, I'm making it. They don't even have to go to the NICU now. Like,
yeah. They actually, at the appointment before they found out that Emilia had died, they were like, and we're going to move you to delivering at 37 weeks instead of 38. And I was like, heck yeah, like one less week pregnant. Let's get these babies out. So they confirmed at maternal fetal medicine and the doctors came in and I basically had I'm sure what it was a very incoherent argument with them about why they should deliver me now.
Oh.
Because they were saying from their point of view, I had boy-girl twins, so they were fraternal twins. So they weren't sharing a placenta. They weren't sharing a sac. They all had their own things. Mm-hmm. So in their mind, it essentially was now kind of just like a singleton pregnancy because there was one living baby inside who had their own things.
Right.
So to them, they started saying, oh, well, now you can go to 39 weeks. And I was just like, no. And I have no clue what I actually said. But what my inside was screaming was, you cannot tell me why my daughter just died. You're saying, I don't know. Sometimes these things happen. Right. I'm saying my daughter was under you guys' care when she died. So why the hell do you think I'm going to trust you with my other surviving child? Like, you can't tell me there's only a 1 to 3% chance of Dion dying at this point.
1 to what?
1 to 3 is what they told me. It's like, there is a 1% chance of Emilia dying. There was a less than 1% chance of Emilia dying. So that number means nothing to me right now. And it's kind of my bad luck that the doctor that I had who did the confirmation of Emilia dying was, I'm sure, an incredibly smart person, but did not have the most empathetic bedside manner, which is, I think, more of what I needed at that point. But he was trying to provide me with research article data, and I was not at a point where I was in a place to believe him or trust him.
Right.
So yeah, that conversation didn't go great, but eventually I just didn't have the strength left to fight anymore, I guess. So they left the room. We went and sat in the parking lot for 2.5 hours. And the maternal fetal medicine office had closed at this point. So we were in the parking lot in the dark, no other cars around. Security drove past us several times. I'm sure looking at us like, why is there this empty car sitting in the park? Or not empty, but why is there this car with these two people sitting in the parking lot after the hours have closed? But we could not think of what to do. Like, our whole world had just changed. I remember saying, this is weird. This is just weird. Like, we were expecting 2 babies. Now only 1 is coming home. This is just weird. Yeah. Like, I wasn't even processing the fact of how sad or broken I was. I just was confused. It was just like, this is a big change of plans. Like, now they're saying maybe I can go to 39 weeks, which is like a whole nother month from now. I'm terrified that Dion's going to die too. So at this point, I was just in shock. I just couldn't process. So yeah, we sat there for 2.5 hours. Then we drove to the parking lot of our apartment building and sat there for another hour, just trying to get the strength to stand up and walk inside. We had our son, who was 18 months old at the time. And thankfully we have family nearby who came, and as soon as I texted Kathy that she needed to come, she texted her dad, who came and watched Aiden. So thankfully we had support with him. But yeah, I just did a whole lot of sitting and staring. I just didn't know what to do. My whole concept of my world had changed. And it took me, I feel like I'm still processing it, but it took a while to get out of the shock of it. The next day we had a fetal stress test again that they had already had scheduled before everything happened. But they said, come on in, we'll check Dion. And they only put the one fetal monitor on me when I went into the office. And it was the small things like that kind of broke me over and over again, because it's more like the realization that things have changed now. I don't need a second one anymore, because they're not going to get any, heart rate accelerations from her because she's dead, which is practically, I fully understand why that makes perfect sense, but it hurt my heart.
Yeah.
And I remember being at least relieved that I was sitting in a different chair. I was sitting in a different chair for the fetal monitoring than I was the last time. I saw a different person. They took me to a different ultrasound room.
Intentionally, you think? Or?
I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm not sure. Maybe. I had a different doctor, and I had the same conversation with that doctor saying, I don't want to be pregnant with both of them right now. They need to come out. And by that point, I was kind of processing that it's not just that I'm worried about Dion, but also it is very difficult to have your dead child's body inside of you.
Right. I can't imagine what it feels like to have twins that are both moving, but to have one not moving.
One side is silent. Yeah. I was having pretty bad Braxton Hicks contractions by that point, just because of being pregnant with twins. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I would have a Braxton Hicks contraction, after I found out she was dead, I could feel her little body curling up in the corner. And it just felt horrible. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. Just the knowledge of having your dead child being pushed around in you. It's just, It's awful. So I had the same conversation with that doctor saying, please, 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 please let us deliver. I'm begging at this point. I don't want to have 2 dead babies. Like, let's just try our best to keep this other one alive. And from their perspective, they're saying, well, but there might be a chance of NICU time if we deliver now. There might be, there's a higher chance of him being fine on the inside than the outside. And I'm like, I do not believe you. Like, thus far, you have been wrong. I get where you're coming from with the medical research articles and the percentages of your experience. But to me right now, my child could be actively dying and you are doing nothing about it. So I thankfully had a more empathetic doctor that second day. She did blood work and did a growth ultrasound. And she essentially told us that she understood why I wanted to deliver. She had to have a medical reason to deliver, but she was going to try to find one. So there was that at least. So I had a little bit of hope with her. So they sent me down, did lab work. The next day, I didn't have anything scheduled. This was Friday at this point. I didn't have any doctor's appointments scheduled, but I could not get Dion to wake up. Like, I was trying everything. I was probably doing some stuff I wasn't supposed to be doing to try to get him to wake up. Was like drinking caffeine, doing jumping jacks, like laying on the side, like poking at him, like, come on, bud, like just show me you're still alive. Cause he had been still for about, I want to say an hour and a half at that point. And to be fair, babies have their own sleep cycles and there's going to be time periods where they're not active. But at that point, I'm up at all hours of the day trying to make sure he's still moving. Right. And I could not get him to move. And we're at a point where I'm like, okay, we're just going to go to the ER. I'm just going to show up to the ER and be like, I don't know if my baby's dead or not. I know one of them is, but I don't know if both of them are. Can you check for me, please? And we get a call like at that moment from maternal fetal medicine. And they said, and I do not remember what the lab was. One lab value was a little bit low and one was a little bit high. And they were like, okay, we can justify bringing you in for observation to like do serial labs to see if anything's off. And I think it was technically some labs that would indicate
preeclampsia.
Yes, that. Yeah. And since I had gestational hypertension, they were like, okay, Mel, maybe we can swing this. So they brought me in on Friday. I showed up at, I think, like 4:00 in the afternoon. They let Kathy stay with me for about 2 hours and then they kicked her out because COVID.
She's already there.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they said that they let her stay initially because they ran labs as soon as I got there, and they were trying to determine whether or not they needed to do anything emergently. And so they said that she could stay while they decided if they were going to do like an emergency C-section or something. But this was also at the very, very beginning of COVID. So this was April 2020.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
End of April and then beginning of May 2020. So they were on the strict no visitors for anybody policy.
Even for labor? And
they did. But that was the one exception. So it was no visitors except for a woman actively in labor.
Okay.
Or if you have like a pediatric patient.
Okay.
So they didn't have the extended like 1 visitor per day policy at the time. So they kicked her out about 2 hours later. And then we spent I was in the hospital for 3 days and we spent almost the entirety of that time on video chat. Just because we were like, I didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to be alone. Like and that was the only option we had for being together. So at this point, I'm admitted in the hospital. They're drawing labs, trying to come up with a reason to deliver and not keep me pregnant. At least that's what the one doctor told me they were trying to do. I am a little bit going crazy at this point. I am by myself in a hospital room with 1 alive baby and 1 dead baby, terrified that Dion, that baby A, is going to die too. Now, I do feel a little bit better because I at least have medical professionals around me at this point. So I've got some of the best nurses I've ever met in my life. Thank goodness for them, who reminded me 1,000 times that weekend that I was not crazy, that I was just trying to protect my kids. It was a very, very tough weekend. I started trying to look stuff up online. I love crafting. And so I was like trying to figure out things that I could do for Emilia or make for Emilia. And I reached way back into my roots and remembered that I like to crochet. So I decided I'm making a baby blanket. I'm making a baby blanket. I'm making a baby hat. I'm making baby booties. Like I'm making all this stuff because it was something that I could actively do. So bless her, I had Kathy driving all over creation to like 5 different Hobby Lobbies and Michael's all over Eastern North Carolina to try to get these very specific like colors of yarn that I decided that I needed to make a rainbow baby blanket. So she drove all over Tarnation on Saturday and she couldn't come up to bring me the yarn, but my nurse went down and picked up the yarn. So I had materials to start. I made her a hat, I made her booties, and I started making a blanket. So during this time, they were doing twice daily fetal monitoring, stress tests, making sure that Dion was still okay. I had one episode when it was Saturday night, and I started just feeling kind of funny. My stomach started hurting, and I was like, something just doesn't feel right. I hadn't felt Dion move for like 30 minutes, and I was like, okay, you know what? I have nurses here. Like, I'm just going to call someone in and be like, hey, can you guys check? Something just feels weird. And as soon as they hooked me up to the monitor, I started having contractions. And they were like every 7 minutes apart or so. So they were pretty far between, but they kept me on monitoring for a couple hours, and they did cervical checks. And I effaced like 10 more %. So they said that they were productive contractions. But then they gave me IV fluids because I was 35 weeks and like 3 days at that point. So the general goal was keep me pregnant until someone says otherwise. So they gave me IV fluids and that stopped it. So I don't.
Dehydrated probably.
Probably. And at first I was like, oh, thank goodness. Like that was kind of scary. Those contractions were starting to kind of hurt a little bit. And then my labs came back and they were all normal. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I work in healthcare. And I know very well if they admitted me for abnormal labs and then my labs came back normal, they're kicking me out of here. Like, there's no reason to keep me in here from their perspective if my labs are back to normal. So I had a breakdown with my poor night nurse at 2 a.m. in the morning. Was like, they are going to kick me out of here and I cannot leave. Like, I need them to deliver these babies. Like, I don't want them both to die. And I felt so powerless. It was the most powerless I felt in my entire life because it was somebody else telling me what I could or couldn't do with my body and my children. And those same people, though they didn't do anything wrong, but in my mind, I had been under their care when one of them had died. So they weren't really in a position in my brain to be making decisions and telling me what I could or couldn't do. But they were the ones who had the power to induce me or not induce me. And it was kind of just a roller coaster of talking to one doctor, and they said, well, maybe we'll have to see how the labs come back, or we'll have to see how like the night goes with the fetal monitoring. And then another one would come in and be like, okay, maybe we can deliver. But then someone else would come in and say, no, 39 weeks. And it was a whole lot of uncertainty. I think because honestly, they didn't fully know what was going on. It seemed like everyone had different opinions. And I got the impression that the general medical consensus was stay pregnant. But I did not like that answer. I was at the point of I was like researching medical articles, like trying to find some article where I could quote to a doctor as soon as they walked in and be like, in this article on this page, it says this percentage for this situation, so you should deliver me. Like, I was just grasping for straws at this point. And I think one of the most frustrating things for me was I felt like I was being completely logical and coherent. Like, in my mind, I was saying, if I'm pregnant with 2 children, one of them died, you can't tell me why that one died. We should deliver now. They're in a safe zone. It makes sense to me for them to deliver. But all that came out when the doctor came in was tears and incoherent words, because I was not in a state to be having a coherent conversation with anybody. But it was the most frustrating thing, because in my mind, I had all these logical thoughts, but I could not get them out of my head. I knew, again, working in healthcare, I knew I was sounding like a crazy person. I knew that they were coming at it from like a medical, logical, third-party perspective, and they had their reasons for their opinions, and I'm just being emotional. But in my head, I knew what I wanted to say. I just couldn't get it out. So I think that was one of the most frustrating things, and one thing that I, again, am so thankful for the nurses that I had, because I could not talk to the doctors for some reason. The doctors came in and I was like, all hell broke loose in my head. Like, I can't. And I think because they were telling me, most of them said some form of, you need to stay pregnant. And that just threw me off, like, into a deep end of not being able to really process anything, since they were the ones who were literally in the power situation. But the nurses were able to stay there with me for like 30 minutes while I babbled and tried to get out the like thoughts that I had in my head. So
would they help you at all? Would they like say, like, we had discussed this earlier and Cassie believes that this, that, and the other thing?
So I'm actually about to say that. So I had one nurse who I had the big breakdown at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning too. And she said, I'll talk to the doctors. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, at least someone maybe can get what I'm trying to say across in a coherent way that's not just me crying at them. And she, I guess, talked to somebody, came back and said, okay, they're going to keep you admitted until Monday, so it's Saturday at this point, when maternal fetal medicine can come by, do rounds, since they're the ones who asked for you to be admitted, and then they'll make a decision then. So it won't be the hospitalists who will decide to discharge you. It will be maternal fetal medicine who got you admitted. So that at least gave me a little bit of reprieve of like, okay, well, at least I know the maternal fetal medicine doctors, and that gives me more time. That gives me a couple more days of like twice daily monitoring of somebody within like arm's reach if I feel like something's wrong. Because I felt so much more comfortable once I was in the hospital, because I felt like at least if something goes wrong, I'm here. Like quick. Yeah, like I'm right next to an OR if they need it. As opposed to at home, it's like a 35-minute drive to the hospital. So if something goes wrong, I'm screwed, essentially. They made the plan to wait until Monday to talk to maternal fetal medicine. And then Sunday afternoon, I had a conversation with a doctor who I did not appreciate, who basically said, no, like, I mean, you can talk to them if you want to, but your medical research says you should stay pregnant until 39 weeks. And then I had another breakdown, because then I was like, well, I felt like I had a little bit of control. Like somebody was listening to me. And then it got like the rug ripped out from underneath me. So my nurses then got to deal with me again, having another nervous breakdown. Sunday night, I knew that maternal fetal medicine was coming Monday morning. And I was like, I have to have these babies tonight. Like, they are going to send me home. And so I was in my hospital room doing jumping jacks. I like went into the bathroom because I was like 3 centimeters dilated. I was trying to break my water.
Oh my God.
Like, I called my nurse and was like, can I run up and down the stairs? Like, you have to give me tips, like on the low, like down low. Can you please give me tips about how I can induce labor? Because I need these babies to come out now and they are going to send me home. And my nurse was like, oh no. Okay. Like, let's talk about this, because the plan is we're going to wait and see what the doctors. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care what the doctors say. They're not listening to me. So anyway, I got in my head that I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call Monday morning. I'm going to call and make a whole bunch of appointments with maternal fetal medicine. I'm going to say the doctor told me to make a bunch of appointments. Then they're going, because typically if you call and say, hey, I'm supposed to make a blah, blah, blah appointment for this, they, at least in my head, we're just making them. So I was like, I'm going to make a bunch of appointments. I'm going to show up and then they can tell me to leave if they want to try to tell me to leave. But I'm going to the doctor every single day. And so the doctor came in, maternal fetal medicine doctor came in Monday morning. I had prepared my arguments as to number one, why I should deliver. Number two, why they should at least give me daily monitoring at their office. If not, and my backup plan was to just go ahead and call and make appointments and tell them that they can kick me out if they want to. Doctor came in and said, I think we can induce right now. And I was like, yes.
Wow.
Yes, that.
This was when you were in the hospital or after you had been discharged?
This is when I was still in the hospital. Okay. So basically, maternal fetal medicine said that because there was no definite known cause of why Emilia died, they couldn't rule out the gestational hypertension. And since the gestational hypertension was still a diagnosis that I had, that meant that it was indicated to deliver now, since if that's what caused Emilia's death, then Dion would still be at risk in that situation. I don't know. I think honestly, they pulled together several different research articles that weren't exactly my case, but like kind of were independent factors that overlapped and just made it work, which I was incredibly grateful for. The note that he wrote basically said that there is no research on my specific case. There's no research on somebody with gestational hypertension who was pregnant with fraternal twins, who one of them died, and when you should deliver. So basically, the doctors, from what he was saying, were going off of cases that were related, but not exactly the same. So like individually gestational hypertension and individually twins with one of them dying. Mm-hmm. So anyway, however he made it work. And I was like, yes, let's do it. Let's go now. Like Kathy started driving up. We were ready to go. So we got into the labor and delivery floor. They induced me with Pitocin. It took a little while to get going. But it took about 3 or 4 hours after I started it, and they, just kept constantly cranking it up. I started having regular contractions. So I'd gotten an epidural with my first pregnancy, loved it, awesome, 10 out of 10 would recommend. And I knew that I wanted an epidural, but I didn't really know exactly when in the process I wanted it. And I was feeling pretty good with the Pitocin regular contractions and my water intact. And I'd always heard that your water breaking makes the contractions worse. Because my first time, my water broke first. So I hadn't experienced contractions without my water broken.
Those are natural contractions, not Pitocin contractions.
Yeah, true. Yes, I have also heard that Pitocin contractions are worse. So I was feeling okay with my water intact. And I was like, I looked at my nurse and I said, we're going to do a science experiment. I know what the contractions are like now. I want them to break my water, and then we can start the process for the epidural. But then I'll have like a little bit of time with my water broken. Without my water broken, I can compare. I honestly was just trying to think of other things to focus on other than the fact that I was about to have a stillbirth. Right. So my nurse was like, okay, like she wants her water broken. She talked to the doctor for me. Doctor came in, broke my water immediately. So much worse. And I was like, oh no, this is a mistake. Let's get the epidural going. Like I didn't sign up for this. This is so much worse. And so they start, they have to push fluids before they do the epidural, which of course I didn't ask them to do before they broke my water. I wanted to wait until afterwards. So then I got to experience the joys of non-medicated Pitocin contractions.
And waiting for an epidural.
Eventually, like 45 minutes later, they'd gotten enough fluid in me. I was sitting at the edge of the bed because the anesthesiologist was about to come in. And I was just kind of challenging myself at this point to not move because I knew that you couldn't move with the epidural, right? But I'm also having really bad contractions at this point, like groaning and moaning all over the place, like making all these strange noises that I did not intentionally make. They were just coming out of me. But I successfully sat on the edge of the bed with the anesthesiologist through 3 contractions. I was like, okay, at least I can know, like, I can do this. So they placed the epidural, started the like test flow thing. Anesthesiologist walks out. I look at my nurse and I'm like, something feels weird. Something feels wrong. Like, something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong. And my nurse was like, what does it feel like? And I was like, it feels like something really big is trying to squeeze out of my cervix. And she was like, no, you just got your epidural. Like, it's going to take some time for it to start feeling like a little bit better. And I was like, no, something's wrong. And so the nurse that I had only been a nurse for about a year, but there was another nurse in there who was like, you should check her. And so they checked me 10 centimeters, baby's head already coming out. And I don't even know what happened. Doctors started getting called. My nurse took off her gloves and went to go throw them away. And the more experienced nurse looked at her and was like, you need to put your gloves on back like right now. There might be a baby coming out right now. And so then, yeah, all of a sudden there was like 15 people in the room because there was a NICU team just in case Sion needed it. There was also a bunch of students, residents, because it's a teaching hospital. Yeah, there was a whole lot of people, but everything was blurry. And I remember them saying, it's time for you to push. And I said, is the epidural going to kick in first? And no one said a thing. You could hear a pin drop. So anyway, I got to experience natural childbirth, or at least partially. Dion was born in like 3 pushes, like right as all of that happened. He came out and the doctor like basically walked in to catch the baby, essentially. Wow. Emilia was born 7 minutes later. So the epidural had started to, like, test dose had started to kick in before she was born. And they had prepared me. So Emilia was breech and she also wasn't moving. So they had prepared me that delivering a stillborn baby is harder than delivering a living baby. Reason being, and I'm sure you can speak to this more specifically, but what they told me is like when you have a living baby, they kind of move their body to assist in the process of coming out.
Yeah.
Whereas
just like this natural turn.
Yeah. Down. Like they're kind of like squeezed up into a little like ball kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If your baby's dead, they do not do that. So they had kind of prepared me that delivering her was probably going to be harder. And that they specifically prepared me for if her head got stuck.
Yeah.
And I think they were trying to be sensitive to me, which I really appreciate. I didn't understand why it would bother me, but I mean, to be fair, it didn't happen to me. They were saying before everything happened, they were asking if I wanted to deliver in the OR so that they have tools available to them for if Emilia's head got stuck and they couldn't get her out. And they said it might be very distressing for you to just have her sitting there, which didn't end up happening. And we couldn't have gotten to the OR anyway because everything happened incredibly fast. Yeah. But so they ended up, from what I can tell, I'm pretty sure they just reached in and pulled her out because she was, I think, footling breech. So her feet came out first. So basically, I think the resident just reached in and pulled.
Sometimes what they do is like kind of tuck the chin a certain way.
That might have been that.
Makes it easier
for them to come out.
Through, yeah.
Yeah. So, because with Dion, they pretty much just caught him. But yeah, with her, they reached in and did a bunch of stuff. So they might have been doing that to help her come out. And I, of course, can't see anything that's happening. I didn't like ask for a mirror or anything like that. So she was born and I already had Dion on my chest. And I looked to Kathy and I said, how does she look? Like, I wanted to know, like, what to prepare myself for. Mm-hmm. And Kathy looked at me and said, still yourself. And I will remember that like till the day.
What?
Still yourself, like prepare yourself.
Okay.
Like it's not good. So by the time I saw her initially, she was all wrapped up in like a little blanket. And I was able to have a moment of like, hi.
Yeah.
Like they put her on my chest and I said, hi, baby girl. And I mean, she didn't look like a normal baby, but I feel like she looked kind of like a normal baby. I guess I could, it wasn't incredibly distressing to me initially to see her. Whereas Kathy saw her being born, which is, I'm sure, a much more traumatic way to see your child for the first time under those circumstances. So I just had both of them on my chest for a while. And then I decided to try to feed Dion. So Kathy held Emilia for a little bit. And I gave birth at a larger hospital where they have cuddle cots. So cuddle cots, for those who don't know, is basically a bassinet with like a cooling blanket on it. So essentially what it does is it keeps a child who's passed away, it keeps their body cool so they can stay with the parents for a longer period of time, as opposed to having to go to the morgue like as soon as possible, basically.
Right.
So they were preparing that. They got, measurements and weights and all that kind of stuff. And I had expected Emilia to be smaller because in the last growth scan that they did, she was like 4 pounds and 6 ounces or something like that. She was smaller than Dion. But when she was born, she was actually a little bit bigger than Dion. So she was 5 pounds, 12 ounces, and Dion was 5 pounds, 8 ounces. So they were comparable sizes. Now, before they were born, we had spoken to a social worker. We had spoken to a chaplain. Like we were trying to, we're very task oriented. So we were trying to like prepare ourselves. Like the day I found out she died, I bought an urn. Like we were already like on the ball of things. And one thing,
your idea of cope, it's kind of like
exactly. It was like, let's do something. Yeah. So the social worker has suggested like, you can help the nurses dress her. Like you can do a bath, like all these like things. I think she was trying to give me more things that I could like, do to participate in caring for her. So the idea of that sounded great. And we were like, okay, yes, like we're going to help dress her. We had like a little outfit that one of my friends had made for her that had her name on it. Like we were as prepared as we could be for that situation. When it came time to dress her, Kathy had the wherewithal to be like, I can't. Like, it's too much. I can't. To be fair, she'd also just held her for like 30 minutes while I was trying to feed Dion. So she'd had a lot of time with her. And I, in my, I'm going to do everything state, was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to suck it up. Like, I can take care of her. Like, I can do this for her. Turns out, dressing a stillborn is not easy and not fun. And was honestly, I feel like, though I did it with good intention, I feel like it was too much for me. Like there was a lot of handling her body that happened, and it kind of made me afraid to handle her at all later on. So the nurses ended up finishing most of getting her dressed because I tried, and then I was like, I can't, this is too much. For the rest of the time in the hospital, I honestly didn't handle her that much. And I think a lot of it had to do with I was just scared. Like as I think most people, hadn't handled a dead person before, hadn't tried to, put a onesie on or anything like that. And yeah, it was just, I think it was too much, too fast for me. So when we got to mother baby, I said, can we put her in the corner? Like, can we put her little cot in the corner? Because I can't handle her body being here right now. Which honestly has taken me until nowish to even start to process. I feel like I have a lot of regrets about my time in the hospital with her. We were incredibly blessed to have the cuddle cot, so she was with us. But I wish now knowing or being in the mental state I am now, I wish I could go back and redo some stuff with her. Like, I wish I could go hold her or look at her but I'm also trying to give myself grace with that I did the absolute best I could in the worst possible scenario.
Right.
Like, I did everything I could handle at that time, but I feel like there's a lot of guilt and shame with that, even within the loss community, because there's a fine balance between being incredibly proud of your kid and wanting to show your kid off and thinking your kid is beautiful, but at the same time, it creates kind of an atmosphere of, I don't feel like that. So is there something wrong with me? Like, I didn't really enjoy looking at her. I didn't enjoy spending time with her body. Now, that doesn't mean that other people can't, but it does kind of make me feel like, am I a bad mom because I didn't want to hold my daughter? You know? I don't know. That's a whole thing that I'm still working with. I'm still working through that. And I feel like I will be for a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff I'm still working through with that. But
I think it's like your belief too. Like, if you know that her soul is gone, that's just something that was holding her soul. And you're not really, I mean, I know like we had a lot of losses in our family, and my husband lost his brother. Not that it's, I mean, it's not in the same situation, but his best friend, I mean, we would go visit his gravesite because we kind of felt like we were close to him at that point, you know, to like for the first few years. And his best friend he wouldn't do it. You know, he's like, that's not him. You know, he's gone. Like he's in heaven now. Like, you know.
Yeah. And so. I think that's something that I'm starting to shift my focus towards and Kathy got there really quickly. It was like, that's just a shell. Like, that's the shell of her. That's not really her. Whereas I think I follow a lot of like lost moms on Instagram and stuff just because it's very isolating to go through the death of your child. And it's nice to, you know, talk to other people who have experienced a similar loss. And they always have beautiful pictures of their child who looks like they're sleeping, like posted. And I'm like, oh, nope, didn't have that. On an probably not podcast appropriate note.
You can cut it out.
I had a conversation with my therapist the other day because everyone should go to therapy. That should be in the podcast. And I was like, I really wish I could go back to my nurses and be like, how bad really was it? There was some shit that happened that I was like, I was not prepared for this. But no one shares pictures of that or really talks about that because that's not pleasant, you know? So I kind of wish I could go back and be like, on the down low, like, how bad was this? Is this as bad as I feel like this was? Or is this just because it only happened to me and I haven't like known anybody else that it happened?
People don't prepare you for what baby could potentially look like when they come out.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of alarming, and depending on when baby's passed and inside of you and how long baby is outside of you, like in the cuddle cot, it can vary.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that no one really can prepare you for.
Right.
Yeah.
And that definitely affects your choice of whether or not you want her by your side the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually got pictures of her. One of my friends is a professional photographer who actually, such a coincidence, but has been trained in doing photography of stillborns.
Oh, wow.
So as soon as we found out, she did my oldest newborn pictures. So as soon as we found out that Emilia had died, we knew we wanted pictures because that's all you're going to have. And we didn't trust ourselves to get pictures.
Right.
I mean, we all have phones, but I'd much rather someone who knows what they're doing take pictures. So we actually went through a whole bunch of different channels, but ended up really relying on our nurses' wiles to get the photographer into the hospital because it was COVID. So there was no visitors allowed. There was no professional photographers allowed. after we had talked to like the clinical administrators about whether or not people could come meet Emilia, because I was technically allowed one visitor, but then this was the only time that Emilia was going to be here. So if anyone was going to meet her, it was going to be at the hospital.
Yeah.
They kind of were wishy-washy, I think, because they didn't really know what the policy was either, because it was the beginning of the pandemic. So what ended up happening is my nurses ended up telling the clinical administrator that my sister was coming to visit. And my sister came in with photography equipment hidden underneath her shirt. And we got pictures. And normally I'm a big time rule follower, but honestly, in that moment, I was like, who is going to stop me? Like,
Right.
This is a once in a lifetime. Like, we're never going to get professional pictures of Emilia ever again. Like, to not fight this policy or not like go around to get out of the rules of it is silly. So we're going to try it.
An exception should be made.
They should.
Honestly.
Yeah, they should. Anyway, so we got pictures. Through
your sister.
Through my sister. And that was the nurses' ideas too. Bless them. Because they understood the situation. Like, I explained that my friend who's a photographer, like, we're trying to get her to come so that we can get pictures. And my nurse came in later and was like, so they're not going to let your friend who's a photographer come, but I told them your sister's going to come. I'm like nodding while I'm doing this. She walked into my room and was like, your sister's coming, right? I was like, yes, my sister is coming. Thank you.
You need to tell me who this nurse is off air.
I don't know her name.
Oh, no.
I could probably recognize her, but yeah, bless all of them. They connived for my benefit, but I really appreciate them. One thing I've really learned from this whole experience is nurses are the shit. Like, for real, I feel like all of my good stories, I'm like, and a nurse did this, and a nurse did this for me.
I love that.
Like, for real. Because I feel like doctors just come in and out and say things and then leave, and then it's the nurse who has to deal with the consequences of what the doctor is saying.
Exactly.
I feel like the nurses would have delivered me the moment they talked to me. But Dion, I was breastfeeding, and Dion was losing weight. So he was a preemie, and he started out at 5 pounds, 8 ounces, and I think he ended at like 4 pounds, 10 ounces or something. It was something where they had a policy where I was supposed to either triple feed or start supplementation. So the lactation consultant came into my room with me just having given birth with 2 babies, one alive, one dead in the room, and told me to breastfeed and then pump and then feed. And I looked at her and said, okay. And then she left. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. So anyway, I talked to the nurses again, who went to bat for me and got us the milk donation. There's the milk bank. They had access to a milk bank. So we actually got some donor milk to use for supplementation. Thank goodness. And then Dion gained his weight back and he was fine. And he was the healthiest kid. Nothing wrong with him at all. They told us there was a 70% chance of him having NICU time. Didn't leave my side for a minute. He was perfectly healthy, which I needed. Yeah. I needed him to be okay. I don't think I could have managed him also being sick. So I'm very, very grateful that he had absolutely no issues, especially for being born so early. He latched on, did great with breastfeeding. We're at 11 months now, still going strong with breastfeeding. Wow. And that really has shown me, because I had the hardest time with my oldest. And it really, seeing the differences between the two of them really shows me that it's really whether or not the kid wants to breastfeed. Or like, it's a kid specific thing and not a bad mom on you thing if you are having trouble breastfeeding.
Right.
Because I had a really hard time breastfeeding my first, and I've had absolutely no problem breastfeeding Dion. A lot of stuff with Dion, I've been like, is this what it's supposed to be like with a newborn? Because I felt attached from the beginning. Breastfeeding's going great. Everything besides his sister dying seems really easy. I'm incredibly grateful for that. The day that we left the hospital, so we stayed the 48 hours that you typically do for a vaginal birth. We were able, in the time that we were in the hospital because of the cuddle cot, to have Emilia with us the whole time. We got the twins baptized together. We got foot molds of Emilia, handprints, footprints, got the pictures taken, all of that stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have the cuddle cot. So I'm eternally grateful that we had access to that. On the day that we left, they gave us a little hat to put on Emilia. We dressed her up, or she was already dressed up in her outfit, but we put little mementos with her, wrote her a note, left it underneath her arm. And we were packing up our stuff and about to leave. And we were going through, just doing a final walkthrough to make sure that we had everything. And we found this flat white bag that was next to the sink. And we were like, what is this? Is this a lot of times they throw stuff in there that's the extra pads and that kind of stuff that you're supposed to get. Mm-hmm. And we looked at it and it said infant body bag. And we were
God.
Oh no, I reached an anger breaking point. And I know no one intentionally left that for me to find. But I went out into the hallway and found my nurse and was like, this cannot be in here right now. I cannot, because I was trying in my head to have a somewhat peaceful image of leaving her in the hospital, which you never want to do with your child. This was the last time I was going to see her. And I was trying so hard to not let that image of the body bag get into my head. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know if I yelled or if I just was very quiet. I'm not sure.
Well, it felt like you were screaming inside.
I felt like I was screaming. So anyway, I feel like that kind of threw off my ability to have a peaceful exit. But anyway, we got it out of the room, and then took some time to try to reach another equilibrium of saying bye to her. And I had crocheted a little butterfly that I put underneath her hand that we put in her little blanket. So we tried our best to take care of her as much as we could. One thing that I heard someone say that will resonate with me forever is that it is impossible to not have regrets when you have a child that dies, because you're trying to fit an entire lifetime of memories into whatever amount of time you have at the hospital, which is impossible. You can't. So there are so many things I wish I could go back and do, but a lot of them weren't possible at the time, either because of the circumstances or because of where I was at mentally or physically or emotionally. So with the best strength we could, we left her with as much of a peaceful state as we could.
Don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode where Cassie's story continues. Thank you so much for listening to this incredible mom story today. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it may have helped you in some way. Make sure you rate and leave a comment so I can be sure to bring you the content that you really want. Please follow the Incredible Moms podcast on Instagram, where you'll also be able to find many updates and episodes. I can't tell you how much I appreciate any support. Stay tuned for another Incredible Mom next week.